Hello everyone. The video that you're going to see contains various portions in relation to PYQ discussions and answer writing discussions that was conducted in the political science and international relations batch that I had taken in 2023, which went on till 2024, 6.5 months overall. What the video is going to show are the answer writing in relation to PYQ discussions, informal discussion that was conducted in the classes. So what generally happens in these discussions is whenever a topic is completed in the class, so let's say Plato has been completed, let's say Aristotle has been completed, or preamble in paper 1 section B has been completed, or India-China relationship has been completed, we discuss all the PYQs that were asked on that topic in the past 5 years and in certain topics in the past 10 years. When I say we discuss, it's me moderating and the students participating in the discussion. And it's not, I just show them the question and we're done with it. That is not how it is done. When I say we discuss, what happens is we discuss how to write the introduction. We discuss how to write the body. We discuss how to write the conclusion. One of the problems that optional students face, including in political science, is answer writing. And it's a skill, it has to be learned, and it has to be taught also. And within the classes, we conduct various answer writing discussions. I conduct separate conclusion writing answer classes also. One of the problems that the students face and that has to be rectified is how to write good conclusions. So in GS, you can write a way forward, but how are you going to write a way forward in, let's say, political theory? Are you going to write a way forward on a question on Aristotle? It's not possible. So how are you going to write a good conclusion is also something that is taught in class. How to write it differently for political theory questions and how to write it differently for, let's say, current affair questions. So you can write a way forward in relation to, let's say, India-China relationship or India-Russia relationship, which may not be the case when we talk about theory. Within the video, you're going to see is the discussion on how to write good introduction, how to bring in thinkers and theories within the body, and how to write good conclusions. Conclusion is also a separate class, part of the foundation only. And there is a link within the description section in which you can see the various conclusion writing classes that have been conducted as part of the foundation. Apart from this, there is also a link to another video. And within that video, you're going to see the GS PYQ discussion. So what happens is one of the strong aspects of political science is that it has 70% overlap with your general studies syllabus or your GS syllabus, particularly polity and international relations. So what I do is, let's say I'm teaching basic structure or judicial review or India-China relationship or any part of Indian foreign policy or international relations. We do a PYQ discussions of the GS questions of the past 10 years and PYQ discussion of the PSIR also. And in this, what generally happens is the PYQ discussions on GS, we try to answer the same questions if it had been written from a PSIR perspective. So how are you going to write the same answer or different answers to the same question if it had been asked in GS and if it had been asked in PSI? Once you watch the video, you'll get a much better understanding of this. One thing, please keep in mind, these discussions that you're going to see, they were conducted after I've taught everything to the students on that topic. So it's a overview discussion. All of that which I'm talking about in the class or the students are talking about in the class, everything would be taught to you in the foundation. So that is not a problem. And all of this answer writing is part of your foundation course. There is no separate fees. It's part of your foundation. And it has to be, because one of the main aspects of UPSC is the written examination. The mains examination is a written examination. You have to learn how to write well. It's a skill. It has to be taught. And that is the primary focus. One of the other things that is part of the foundation course is you can show me all of those answers. So it's a provision that I give to the students when we're discussing all the PYQs. If you want to write the answers to the PYQs, write them and show it to me. The offline students show it to me a few days later after the classes. And the online students send me the answer on WhatsApp, which I check, get it scanned and send them back. And then we have a discussion over the phone. But it's completely up to you. It's not compulsory. So if you want to write just one answer on the PYQ, that's up to you. If you want to write all of them, that is also up to you. But it's a provision, and you get that luxury in the class that you can show and write all of those answers to me, and I'll check all of them for you. And enjoy the video. Key concepts. So we've done national interest, security power, I've already said, balance of power, deterrence, transnational actors, collective security, and this we've already done under globalization. Further, we've done superpowers, bipolarity, arms race, nuclear threat, collapse of the Soviet Union, American hegemony, and NAM would be the next topic, whose handout I've shared with you. So in that way, we've done with this particular topic, and we'll go to NAM in the next one. Any doubts on that? So we'll discuss all the PYQs in. What are the various constraints on American hegemony today? Which of these are likely to become more prominent in the future? How would you start the introduction? What? How would you start the introduction? Hegemony. What about it? Collapse of the Soviet Union. Okay, so one idea would be that you talk about that there was a collapse of the Soviet Union, and post 1991 till 2008, there you had American hegemony. What else can be the introduction of? Discuss, but you have to start the introduction somewhere. So if you're going to start with today, like, what are you going to say? American hegemony in the introduction. But you're starting the body within introduction. So first define what is American hegemony. What do you mean by hegemony itself? So when we started American hegemony, I gave you definitions on what. So write those down. Like, this is the basic aspect of what is known as American hegemony. Then you have to talk about the fact that it emerged within 1991 in relation to collapse of the Soviet Union, and on considered to have ended, and the multipolar world started with American dominance still there after the 2008 financial crisis. Why? Because if you're going to discuss today, you have to talk about what was in the past, like how it has changed from the past itself. So when you're talking about today, you're basically talking about the multipolar world that is existing today, where you have American dominance plus the rise of China, China and other countries. Now, then you come to the main part of this. What are the actual constraints then on American hegemony? What are the current constraints? So obviously, rise of China would come here. What else? Changing. So you can talk about, yes, multipolarity. That is the change in the world order. So the rise of Donald Trump and American protectionism, the election of Donald Trump and the rise of protectionism within the US. What else? So that is Donald Trump itself. Like what kind of alliances? What kind? So the rise of, but that would come in multipolarity, no? BRICS. That would be an example of multiple. So what would you say about it? How is it a constraint? Economic problems in terms of how is it a constraint of American hegemony? Yes, there is a supply chain dependence, but it again goes back to China itself that they're trying to move away from dependency on China. So that has how? Like link it to American hegemony. How are transnational actors? Are you going to link it with American hegemony? So de-dollarization, yes, but multipolarity. So if what you have said, transnational actors, in that, what would happen is now global problems are not cannot be solved by the US alone. What Joseph Nye said, USA can't go at it alone. In the sense they have to work with other countries, whereby you can give the example of the COVID pandemic and other aspects, or Quad also, in terms of security. Now you have 4 reasons for constraints. So it is 4C. So therefore it is 250 words. So about 30 words you're giving what is American hegemony in the introduction and the time period. Then you're talking about constraints. So how many words are gone? 150 give and take. The next part is which of these are likely to become more prominent in the future? So all of these constraints that you have given here, which are going to actually increase over time? All of them. All of them. Multipolarity is not going anywhere. China is not going anywhere. Transnational actors are not going anywhere. And you'll have to maybe just talk about, let's say, protectionism. But what is going to happen is that when you're talking about rise of China as a constraint, bring in the second aspect within that paragraph only, rather than forming separate paragraphs for this, because they're talking about which of these are likely. So talk about rise of China as a constraint, then talk about how it would become more prominent in the future. Talk about multipolarity, BRICS and others, and then talk about how they would become more prominent in the future with the rise of India in itself. Is this part clear? Any doubts on this? Any other constraints you can, any theory you can? So that's actually very good. So in terms of rise of China, how it would become much more prominent in future if you link it to theory, then Thucydides trap. Multipolarity, complex interdependence. Transnational actors, cobweb model. Right? Is this clear? So you can link it with theories also then. Bipolar structure of the world is more stable than a multipolar world. 1D. Therefore, it is 150 words. How would you start the answer? So define what is bipolarity, then define what is multipolarity. Who has said this? Bipolar worlds are more stable. Realist. So bring in the realist argument, whereby not Keon. What's his name? Kenneth Waltz. Kenneth, new realism. I said no. Morgenthau really didn't get into this in terms of bipolarity that much. It was actually Kenneth Waltz that basically talked about that bipolar world would be more stable. So your introduction in itself, what is bipolar and multipolarity in itself would take about 40, 50 words. Let's say 40. You're left with 100 words. You'll talk about this. And any critique you can bring in here. You can bring in India. India has said that a multipolar world would be more stable. So once we've done Indian foreign policy, we've talked about strategic autonomy and other aspects, you can bring that aspect in. Is it clear? National interest is an essentially contested concept. How would you start the introduction? Again, 150 words. What? What is national interest? And how is it contested? Yes, so you can talk about what is the contest between. You can bring it the idealist argument. You can bring it the realist argument. You can bring it other people, other thinkers also, but I don't think you would be able to because it's 150 words. You can bring in also the feminists, whereby they say national interest does not take into account the. You can bring in elite theories also, that national interest is basically elite interest. So all of these theories you can bring in depending on your word limit and how well you're able to interlink all of them. You can see it's dependent upon you, because if you are going to define it too much, then you would only be left with idealist versus realist. So you'll not be able to bring in the feminist and the elitist arguments. Discuss the conceptual, and we've not even talked about the Marxists, because in NI, national interest, we've also talked about what is the Marxist. Discuss the conceptual dimension of collective security. How would you start introduction? What is collective security? Conceptual dimensions means theories, right? What are the various theories that I've talked about collective security? So you bring in the idealist argument in relation to, let's say, or you can say liberal internationalism or idealist, League of Nations or UN Security Council. You can also bring in NATO in this. You can talk about the motive behind the idealist versus the realist argument in terms of collective security. What was that? Like, what was the critique of NATO in relation to UN Security Council? It was the critique of the realist argument by the liberal international. It didn't, yes, it didn't actively promote peace. And what is complex interdependence that you already are aware? Discuss the role of transnational actors in the international system. Okay. The next is critically examine the decline of the USA as a hegemon and its implication for the changing international order. The answer is critically examine. How would you start the introduction? What is American hegemony? Again, the same thing from 1991 till 2000. So, first you have to examine the decline of the US. It's the same thing: rise of China, multipolarity, rise of transnational actors, protectionism of the US. Then criticize them. There is a rise of China, but the rise of China is not to the extent that they can compete with the Americans. Multipolarity is ensuring that more alliances are formed in favor of the Americans. So, what is the next country that is right? India. And India is working with the US in Quad alliance. You look at European Union, which is also a part of the multipolar world, which is also working with the US. Look at Brazil and other countries which also are working with the US. So that is a criticism of this. Transnational actors, whereby you can say, make the argument that all of these major transnational actors, Google and all of these, like MNCs, international organizations like IMF and World Bank, basically controlled by the Americans. They have the highest SDR or quota within the IMF. The head of the World Bank is always an American. So that is the way that you can criticize this. Is this clear? Explain the concept of balance of power. Soft power also you can. Americans have tremendous soft power currently. Demographic dividend. Americans don't have a demographic dividend. China also doesn't have a demographic dividend. Both of them don't have. They're also aging and the Americans are also there. It's just that the Americans are better placed because Americans can allow immigration to occur. But the Chinese are not going to allow immigration. To explain the concept of balance of power and what are the various techniques for maintaining balance of power? Arms race. Techniques of maintaining balance of power. So, deterrence, extended deterrence, arms race, credibility is in relation to deterrence only. Alliances, collective security. So, all of these are aspects through which you can maintain balance of power. Right? We've talked about all of them. You can write 3, 3, 4 lines on each of them, and your answer would be done. Examples you can give, let's say for collective security, give the example of NATO or the UN Security Council. Yeah. And you can see examples cannot be more than one line. If you're giving example more than one line, it means you are over explaining. What are the challenges in the operation of the principles related to collective security in the UN Charter? How would you start the introduction? What is collective security? And then mention what is collective security in the UN Charter. I gave you the article also on how it is mentioned in the. You can talk about on how the idealist or the liberal internationalist talk about that the collective security of the UN Security Council moves towards peace, actively promotes peace. But the realist, in terms of NATO, doesn't do that. You can give the example of the first Gulf War, in which collective security action was undertaken by the UN Security Council. But you can then also have to give the critique. What is the primary critique? Veto power of the great powers. It doesn't work actually at the end of the day. What are the other challenges? Veto power is one of them because it's talking about challenges. So you have veto as a challenge. What else? So global south is not represented, or the major powers like India is also not represented. What else? So that is just veto. Like all of them are not going to agree at the end of the day. Peace is not, this goes back to the liberal internationalist argument. So all of these, like you give 4, that would be more than enough. Any doubts on this? First would be veto, underrepresentation of other powers such as India. The idealist argument that it doesn't actively promote peace, and most countries look for their own collective alliances to ensure protection. Give me one more, your answer would be done. What are the other challenges of collective? Nuclear threat. Nuclear threat for collective security. Oh, okay. Achha, for the various techniques. Balance of terror. Right? That would also go here in terms of balance of terror for various techniques. But you give me one more challenge. 3 would be enough, but any theory, any concept. Aggressor cannot be identified. Like who is the main aggressor in this particular part? So it's the problem with the Israel-Palestine conflict. Is Israel the aggressor or Palestine the aggressor? Or basically Hamas the aggressor? So the world is divided on this particular idea itself. Discuss the utility of nuclear deterrence theory in the context of recent standoff between India and Pakistan. Introduction. First, explain what is deterrence. And it comes in relation to balance of terror and how both the countries are also using nuclear weapons. We've done this under nuclear threats and under deterrence also. What is the confusion? 2000 Uri happened now. So what can happen is, let's say if we go to war, then are we going to fight a limited war or a actual fresh war? So in that sense, you have to talk about one important aspect that I said in relation to India-Pakistan, and that is tactical nuclear weapons. The Pakistan keeps on. And once we do Indian foreign policy, we'll talk about what Dr. Jaishankar also said, which was Pakistan indulges in nuclear scaremongering. So all of these talks, or all of these concepts, thinkers, you can bring in your answer. Identify the benefits of the multipolar world. So what are the benefits of a multipolar world? It's not a benefit. Like the realists would say, balance of power would not exist in a multipolar world. What are the benefits of a multipolar world? So it's 250 words. Complex interdependence. Okay. So how is that a benefit? How is not having hegemony a benefit? So you have power distribution. You can bring in the pluralist argument in relation to this, whereby power, there are multiple centers of powers. What else? What else is a benefit of multipolarity? So it allows for the rise of other powers. So in the sense, if it's a bipolar world or a unipolar world, they don't allow the rise of other powers. But in a multipolar world, other powers can also rise. What else is the benefit? You can talk about that India is a supporter of multipolar world. What else would you bring in here? That a multipolar world is much more likely to take collective action for collective problems. That is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 points would be enough for that. You have to interlink. Right? We've talked about different concepts in different aspects. But once UPSC would ask a question, you have to ensure that you're able to interlink different aspects together. Any doubts? How would you start your answer? Discuss the limitations of comparative methods to study of political science. How would you start the introduction? Yeah, obviously. Comparative politics is the only keyword there. In all of those questions, what would you write then? What is comparative politics?
The same line from the handout.
Yeah, I would prefer that. Write what the first line in your handout talks about. Alexis, what he has said, that would be a very good way to start your introduction. And then explain what is comparative politics. And then go to the body structure and give down the limitation. And also, please talk about Neeraj Chandru. It's a very important that Indian scholars are also brought into this context. Subject matter of comparative politics we have already talked about. Outline the limitations of comparative political analysis. So what are the primary limitations? It's Eurocentric. So bring in Mathematics and what's her name? Neeraj Chandru, and say that both of them said that it is Eurocentric. What else? Highly institutionalized, descriptive and not analytical. crisis of nation states, political culture is ever changing. So what would happen is Makades and Neera Chandu, both of them have said basically the similar things. And you also have other scholars that you have written. Find out where you can make them come together, interlink them. Make sure that the keywords are there. Make sure in the limitation answer, keywords are there or underline them. That would make your answer. Because there are few things that are actually limitations. Eurocentrism, generalized behavior, othering that is done for other countries. It's institutionalized in nature. Right? Examine the significance of discusses limitations. So again, it is 20 marker within this. Same thing would be there, 100, 150. Same scope of the questions would be there. Do a lot of answer writing. If you do it right now, what is going to happen? You still, the content is fresh in your mind. It's easy to do. That you can make the, and what I've mentioned in class, the examples and all of this, that is also fresh in mind. Over time, you're going to forget this. There's only one student who's continuously writing answers, that's Chandni. And all of you are writing very infrequently. Right? Write, but all of you do write well. It's just that write more often. We have 5 minutes. All right. So, no, I'm not going to start the new topic. Start it tomorrow only. Anyone has any doubt? No doubts?
So while writing names, like should we use the second, can we just use the second name like Robert Michels? Can we just use Michels? Or is
No.
it advised to use the full? Okay.
No, full name.
Okay.
Full name. What you can do is maybe if it's a 300 marker question, mention what the work that they have written, but it's 150. That is a waste of words. So you just mention the name itself. But yeah, full name, not the surname itself. All right, so we'll meet tomorrow then. Everyone just also online, just send me your WhatsApp me your answers. So in 2023, the question was Satyagraha and Indian nationalism. How are you going to answer it? Bring in Swaraj. Swaraj is the theory. Satyagraha is the praxis. So bring in Swaraj here. The question is trying to, what is Swaraj? It links Indian nationalism with Satyagraha. Satyagraha is the praxis. Indian nationalism is the way that Swaraj should function in India. Have village republics, have a moral force, all of those concepts is 150 words. Do not get too much into depth here. Best answer would focus upon Swaraj only here. Any thoughts on this? Right. The next is analyze workers' movement in pre-independent India. That you've already written a lot on. Trace the role of militant and revolutionary movements in Indian national movement. You've done them separately. So best would be, this is 6P, therefore 250 words. 125 words on militant and 125 words on revolutionary. So that you give equal weightage to both the aspects. The next thing is national movement was India was anti-imperialist and increasingly radical in its socio-economic and political programs. What are you going to write here? How are you going to start the introduction? So it's 20 marks, so 300 words. You tell me. What do you mean by radical? We've talked about radical humanism, we've talked about different concepts altogether, no? Yes, something out of the box, something a little extreme for that time. Yet, no, introduction first. What are the primary keywords? National movement, anti-imperialist. Then to it's complete question then. See, national movement was anti-imperialist. Like that's just 1 or 2 lines. That's not much difficult to explain. So national movement in relation to how was it radical and how was it anti-imperialist. Radical in itself would be two parts, socio-economic plus politics. What you have to do is then focus on national movement. You've already done various perspectives on national movement. Dalit, radical, oh sorry, what's that? Liberal, Marxist, subaltern. Few lines you would have to bring from all of them. Because you have to bring in perspectives on national movement. But it has to be very specific to, let's say, socio-economic or political programs. So let's say if we talk about Mahatma Gandhi, his perspective you obviously have to bring in. What was his socio-economic perspective? Trusteeship, Sarvodaya, right? Just leave it at the word, don't have to explain this. What was political? Swaraj, village republics. Easy. What about radical? Oh, sorry, Dalit perspective or liberal perspective or subaltern perspective? Forgotten. Any thinker. Let's say you bring in one of the thinkers we've done in political theory, M.N. Roy. M.N. Roy's political idea would be, no, what was his idea? That India is like a Devi. Oh, sorry, Aurobindo Ghosh. Sorry, not M.N. Roy, Aurobindo Ghosh. What was his idea? Shakti. So you bring in the politics in terms of Shakti. In that way, you can bring in multiple thinkers, multiple perspectives that we've already talked about, and talk about them in a comparative sense. Okay, this person said this person said this, and then your answer would be done. The point is you would have now multiple perspectives to write here. You can bring in Dr. Ambedkar also, who talked about socio-economic in terms of positive liberty. You can talk about, let's say, Jawaharlal Nehru, who brought in the idea of planning and industrialization or focus on heavy industrialization, completely opposite to the views of Gandhi. You get the way that you should approach this answer. Break it down always into different aspects. Then you'll have multiple views to write here. All right. So this question, first one we have talked about in relation to political parties. Political parties and pressure groups as sine qua non of democracy. What does it mean? Necessary for democracy. Essential for democracy. So it's 1B. So technically this is 150 words. Yes. And considering that it has both political parties and pressure groups, both of them have to be talked about. And what would happen is, what is then the keyword? How many keywords are there? 3. And therefore, what is the primary keyword? Democracy. So for democracy, you would have to talk about political parties and pressure groups. So democracy is obviously PSIR paper 1, but we have also covered democratization within comparative politics also. So you'll talk about, let's say, your introduction might be of 30 words of conclusion. That leaves you how many words? 90. Within 90, 45 words for political parties and 45 words for pressure groups. And this is one of those questions where the difficulty would be too much information. So what are you going to write then? Are you going to bring in the polity part? No, because that would not come in relation to pressure groups also. So how are you going to then, what are you going to say in introduction? How are you going to start the introduction? What? How? Yeah, so that would be linking all the three in the sense that political parties want to rule within a democracy while pressure groups only want to influence public policy or influence the government. So that would be a good introduction because you have linked all the three keywords. Then what would you say? That yes, Jani, that would be correct. That both of them are part of what is known as deliberative democracy. They're essential for it. What else? Considering there is 150, what is going to happen? You have to find topics in which all the three are connected. That would be the best. If you give me just one line on political party differently and then one line differently on pressure groups, it is fine. But the best would be if in one line all the three terms are there. What else? Anything else in which all the three are connected? Let's say if I bring in Michael's iron law, because that can be brought in everywhere in political participation. It can be brought in both for pressure groups and political parties. That both political parties and pressure groups can become oligarchs, be controlled by one individual, which is a problem that you find within democracies also. I think then the answer would be done. You have done three. You write a conclusion connecting all of them. Your answer by and large would be done in this. Difference between NAM and non-aligned? Any doubts? All right, so we're done with non-alignment. Any doubts on non-alignment? So we'll do the PYQs also for non-alignment. Right. There are no doubts on non-alignment? All right, so the first question was asked, discuss the relevance of normative ethos of NAM in magnifying India's soft power in pursuit of our national interest.